General Ramser is advancing his division now past the heater house, launching another attack on the left wing of the waiting Federal Army. General Ramser on the brown horse behind his men, urging them forward. The Confederate line is now realizing that General Ramser is down. That's the report we have here, is that General Ramser is down. General Ramser is now being treated in the field hospital. I've got two-way radios and I can't find out what's going on in the fog of war, but here he is. He's on the table being attended to by the surgeons now. They are determining that the wound is in fact mortal. General Early had been watching Ramser's defense from the Valley Pike and said, "Why can't all my divisions hold like Ramser's?" But now that they know he's down, and somehow the word that a general like Ramser is down travels through the whole army, it's becoming harder and harder for them to stand. Let's have a hand for Matthew Brady here. It's a hard way to make a living, isn't it? In reality, they tried to sneak General Ramser off the field in an ambulance and almost got away with it. They were almost through Strasburg when they were overtaken and he was taken into custody. The legend is that one of Custer's cavalry rode up to the driver of the ambulance and demanded to know who was inside. And the driver, according to legend, said, "The general told me not to tell, sir." So they took the ambulance and Ramser back to Belle Grove and laid him in one of the rooms there, tried to make him comfortable. Dodson Ramser was so pious that once during a battle, after he had asked about 10 times for artillery support, he was yelling at one of his aides and said, "I've been asking for a damn gun for over an hour." And he stopped and he immediately went into prayer to ask for forgiveness for that oath. And now General Sheridan is up from his nap. He has ridden the length of his lines once and again. We cheered him with throats of brass, one of his soldiers said. The orders are in place, and the great long scythe of the Federal Army is about to come down on this field. I don't understand it. All this blood and suffering, and you're impressed by smoke rings. I'll be back. And now here it comes. In reality, the Federal line, about that deep, was 3 miles wide when it came down on the Confederate forces. Now the Confederate line is breaking and falling back. They're trying to find some way to maintain order, but the advance of the Union line is irresistible as the advance of the Confederates had been in the morning. And now Jubal Early sees his great opportunity, this great political possibility, begin to slip away from him. One of the soldiers here wrote, "I never on any other battlefield saw so much blood as on the field at Cedar Creek." He said the bare limestone rocks would not receive it, and the spare summer grass could not cover it. One Federal soldier who was wounded in the rout of the morning laid on this field not far from where we are, all during the day, desperately wounded. The bummers, the civilians that follow the army, came and stripped him of his shoes and his accoutrements following the Confederate army north. And then in the afternoon, he became aware that the bummers were running back the other way. And then the Confederate line of battle retreated over him, and then his own unit came right over where he had been shot and picked him up and took him to safety. You saw the horses galloping to the rear with the guns. They all converged on a single road in Strasburg. And then the little bridge over No Name Creek broke down, and it all came to a stop. And it was then that Jubal Early began to regret that his half-hearted orders of the middle part of the day had not been observed to get the captured wagons and the captured guns to the rear. It was the last great opportunity for Jubal Early. He had tried and failed too many times. Probably the only person who appreciated how much he had achieved and how nearly he had succeeded was Robert E. Lee, who shortly after Cedar Creek wrote him a most fatherly letter saying, "My confidence in you remains, but with the situation among the press and the politicians of Richmond, I cannot leave you in command." Dodson Ramsey was taken to Belle Grove House, where that night, when the fighting was over, George Custer of Ohio came to see him. Custer's typical way, he clanked in and sat down on the bed and jostled him and caused him great pain. Wesley Merritt of Illinois came to see him. Henry DuPont of Delaware came to see him. All Union officers paying their last respects to a valued friend and an enemy officer. I wonder if they thought about the night they left the academy and had that party at Benny Haven's. They sang a sophomoric kind of song that night, all of them together before they went their separate ways to war. And here's one verse of that song. To our comrades who have fallen, one cup before we go. They poured their lifeblood freely out, pro bono publico. Tall marble points the stranger to where they rest below. They lie forgotten, far away from Benny Haven's O. They had to have remembered that song that night in Belle Grove as they tried to comfort their dying friend and enemy. He made it through the night, and in the morning he died, as his friend said, as befits a Christian gentleman and a Confederate soldier. He represented the hope of the South. He represented the generation, the entire generation that was lost. He was one of the best. No one knows what he could have accomplished had he lived. A mile from here, on the other side of Valley Pike, Charles Russell Lowell died that night of a mortal wound. The Lowells of Massachusetts. Like Dodson Ramseur, he was in his 20s. Like Dodson Ramseur, he had just had a child born. His general's commission was in the mail and arrived the next morning. Together they represented the generation north and south that never got a chance to serve, never got a chance to lead. And it's a poignant comment on a generation lost in this great Civil War. And they died within a couple of miles of where we stand. It is their memory we honor today. The scenario is winding down. The defeat is complete. And I want to urge you again not to try to rush from the field today. There's plenty to do and see here yet. The Tuckahoe Social Orchestra will be striking up shortly in the main performance tent. There's still an opportunity to buy a copy of The Guns of Cedar Creek right here. Still an opportunity to buy a web card to view this whole experience again on the World Wide Web. We've been live during this entire reenactment, and we'll be live again tomorrow. Meanwhile, hundreds of still pictures, interviews, and footage of the other events are being put up on the internet site, livinghistorycam.net.
Sergeant Vince Turner with the 43rd Battalion Virginia Partisan Rangers, Allegheny Battery. And I'm here today to help reenact the 135th anniversary of the Battle of Cedar Creek. My interest in all of this is that I had a number of ancestors who fought in the Civil War. They were all German immigrants, and they fought for the North. As you can see, I'm wearing gray, and I'm fighting for the South, but that's because I do have a belief in states' rights, at least as they existed at the time. What I've done for myself, I've been reenacting for about 15 years. I've been with a number of different units as I've built up a persona for myself based on my experiences of reenacting. So if someone was to come through camp and ask me what my story was, basically it goes something like this. I enlisted in the U.S. Army, Company D, 1st U.S. Artillery, in the spring of 1856. In 1861, at the outbreak of hostilities of the war, we were transferred up to Fort Washington, Maryland, in order to man an old seacoast fortification. And at that time, I became very acutely aware of how my relatives were being treated in the state of Maryland. President Lincoln occupied the state. The governor illegally decided to have a convention that he moved out to the town of Frederick in the western part of the state. And by doing this, what he did was effectively keep Maryland in the Union. He kept them from being able to garner enough votes for secession. So at that time, I basically deserted the U.S. Army. I was an enlisted man, so I didn't have a commission to resign. Went to Baltimore and enlisted with the Chesapeake Artillery, which is also known as the 4th Maryland. At the Battle of Gettysburg, our captain was killed. I left the unit at that time, went to Northern Virginia and hooked up with the 43rd, and I've been with them ever since. And that's why I'm here at Cedar Creek. Now, the importance of this battle is that at the time, the Shenandoah was very important to the Confederacy because it was known as the breadbasket of the Confederacy. It provided a lot of livestock and a lot of mainstays, foodstuffs for the Confederate troops. So one of the main objectives of the Union Army was to drive the Confederate forces out of the valley. At the time of the battle, it was October of 1864, the commander of the Union forces was in Washington, and the commander of the Confederate forces decided it would probably be a good time to mount a sneak attack on the Union troops. So what he did was that the Union troops were encamped north of Cedar Creek. The Confederate troops were to the south, Cedar Creek actually being a little to the south of where we're presently located here close to Middletown. And in the early morning of October 20th, under a heavy fog, what he did was he had his troops strip off any implements, any cooking gear that would make a lot of noise. He snuck across the river. He placed artillery on the Valley Pike, which is now Route 11 out here, and actually routed the Union troops out of their beds and out of their camp and forced them back. Unfortunately, at that time, he said to his adjutant, I believe we have them whipped. They won't stand and fight. They're discouraged, and they'll keep on going. I'm going to go ahead and feed my boys. And he had them stop and actually feed on the breakfasts that the Union troops were making. At this time, however, the Union commander, who was actually only on his way to Washington, was in Winchester, heard the ruckus, and rode 14 miles back to rally his troops just a little bit north of here. And what happened then was that they stood their ground. He rode up and down the line, waving his hat and his sword, saying, "Come on, boys, let's give them hell, let's push them back." And it's exactly what they did. So what could have been a great Confederate victory here actually turned into a rather terrible defeat. The Confederacy lost possession of the valley. And the other thing that's important about this is that President Lincoln needed a major victory at this time. The election is next month, November of 1864. George McClellan was against him, and it looked like the North was getting tired of the war. He needed a major, not only military, but a political victory, and the route at Cedar Creek actually provided him with that. So Lincoln did go on to win the election of 1864, and about 6 months from now, with Appomattox, the war would come to its conclusion.
Sometimes they're like a butternut color on the outside. I didn't do this.
For meeting, and then we have like a big dinner at the end of the year.
Yeah, that's kind of what we did. Yeah. Get it up, get it up, come on, come on. You're right, we're over on Gaylord. Oh, second platoon, rally! Second platoon, to my left. All mine, rally! All to my left, all mine. Arm it up, quickly!
Camouflage doesn't work. No. I would take it like Sam's Club. Sounds sort of hurt.
But you know, I think they have to teach them to be that aggressive. They're flight animals.
Yeah. What if your horse
Well, the way infantry protects against cavalry is four of us stand back to back and hold our bayonets. And they say a horse won't run onto their we never really tested it, but that's how we did it.
That is something
No.
Misty would work. Oh, Misty would be like that horse over there.
The first nation, and this is the third. No, second.
Ladies and gentlemen, please express your appreciation to the cavalry forces assembled here today. It's a demonstration of cavalry tactics and engagements from the Civil War. Good afternoon and welcome to the 135th anniversary and 10th annual reenactment weekend at Cedar Creek, Virginia. I want to make you aware of what the schedule is and what your opportunities are while you're here today, and make a couple of housekeeping announcements. There's much more to come today. At 2 o'clock in the main tent, up by the main entrance, there will be...
Past the heater house. What we're going to do probably is fire around in support of the brigade back behind this tent line, and then we're going to break the section and move forward very, very close to the crowd in front of the medical stuff down here. Reform the section. I can probably see it because we've walked it. Reform the section right in front of those rocks. Go down and
Which rocks?
those rocks right here. Okay. Right here. Right in front of the surgeon's tent. Right in front of there. We'll try to reform the section. Those guns actually.
Behind the infantry will be.
My intent is for them to stay to our flank. We'll be their flank. We'll be the far end of their line.
It's not going to work. These two anyway ain't going to work if they advance through it.
This is a 26 North Carolina
And I'll tell you,
1st
we're going to go down there
Infantry.
slow
No,
and easy,
excuse me.
following their advance. You guys may say,
Artillery.
sit around so we can get through it. So we may move the gun a bit. So, hey, anybody got any questions? You got any concern?
We're here on the field of Cedar Creek Battlefield. It's the weekend of the 16th and 17th of October, and we're reenacting the 135th Battle of Cedar Creek. So today, like at the time, we as the North will withdraw and be defeated by the Rebs, and tomorrow we'll come back and we'll drive them back. I'm Nick Chapman. I'm here from England, and I'm currently joined the 1st Maryland Volunteer Infantry, and we're teamed up with the 7th Pennsylvania and the 3rd Maryland, and we form part of one of the National Regiment divisions here.
Now I understand this is your first reenactment?
This is my first really big reenactment.
What was involved in getting your costume ready?
Well, I bought the uniform about a year ago, and the outlay for that was probably $600, and that's the boots, trousers and jacket cap. The rifle I have is borrowed, but a rifle normally costs between $450 and $600, and the leatherware probably another $300.
What are you getting out of this? How has it been going so far?
It's great fun. It's great fun to be with a group of guys from all kinds of different backgrounds, all with a love of the Civil War, a love of history, and to really participate and have people coming up from the public asking about the life, how you eat, because we slept here last night and it was bitterly cold. Bitterly cold. They're sleeping in a set of long johns, a wool uniform, a thick overcoat, 2 blankets and a poncho, and it was still bitterly cold. I can tell you.
Now, were there actually English soldiers involved in the Civil War?
Oh, there were. There were many. In fact, there were many from the British Isles. A lot of immigrants who stepped straight off the ship and just enlisted for the bounty. So a large percentage of Irish, Scots and Englishmen on both sides.
And may I speak to you, sir? How long have you been involved, and what brings you here?
Well, I've been doing this a little bit longer than Nick. I'm doing this my 23rd year now. I like the site out here at Cedar Creek. It's one of the few places where I actually get to do this on the original battlefield site. And it's still very lovely, rural, and pastoral out here in the Shenandoah Valley in this area. So I like it out here very much.
I've heard a lot of people speak of the spiritual quality of being involved in a living history battlefield reenactment. Have you had any experiences along those lines?
Well, back during the 125th anniversary reenactments back in the mid to late 1980s, I and some of the other guys that were a little more rabid in our pursuit of reenacting gradually began to identify what we called moments of insight. And it was a time, a moment, when the realization would sort of sweep over you and suck you in that what you're seeing and experiencing was exactly what you'd read in the past, described in first-person letters, diaries, or in regimental histories. And that you, maybe for the first time in 125 years, were experiencing and understanding part of what they really did and lived at that time. So since the members of the Grand Army of the Republic died from the 1890s on up through the early 19-teens, we now have developed not a complete understanding, but a better understanding than most other people in America today have of what it was to save the Republic during the American Civil War.
Now, a reenactment has got to be different on the actual battlefield site.
Well, yeah, there's times when we're at original sites that maybe there's things people see or hear that they can't quite explain, and then you do get more of a thrill too. There's more of a chill that runs down your spine when you almost can feel it. You almost can feel the difference, the ability to sense the past.
Because this is where it was. When I came back earlier, she never here.
Should have told me, Dad.
For those unknowledgeable, Abraham Lincoln and the Honorable Mr. Davis.
We Americans are all here only because we agreed to the principles of good character in the words of 4 pieces of paper, the Declaration of Independence. Thank you.
This field of glory is harvested, and the crop is already appropriated. Now new reapers arise, unwilling to work the established fields. They see no distinction in adding story to story upon the monuments of fame erected to the memory of others. Our fathers were the pillars of the Temple of Liberty. As their memories recede away, the pillars will crumble away, and the temples must fall, unless we, their descendants, supply their places with other pillars, hewn from the solid quarry of sober reason.
Come on. This is your gun. Report to your gun. You're the 12. Take the kill.
After a battle like this, being so energized, we do this every single weekend, and you have to understand that it's not just a weekend sport, it's not just an adventure, it's a lifestyle, and it's one that we practice every single day. Thank you.